Hey guys, I'm Paul the Motor Guy. Now in this video, I'm going to go over a very important skill when it comes to riding, and that is emergency braking. Emergency braking is a skill that needs to be automatic because there isn't a lot of time to think when an emergency braking situation presents itself. You never know when you will need this skill. It could be your first day of riding or 20 years into it. I tell the students in my basic rider course, if the only time you practice emergency braking is for 45 minutes in class, you will not remember what to do a year from now or 10 years from now when you have to use it. Now, to obtain maximum braking effectiveness, you must be able to operate your brakes at almost wheel lock, which is referred to as independent skid or threshold braking. Now, if you ride a cruiser type motorcycle, about 70% of the stopping power comes from the front brake and about 30% from the rear. If you ride a sport bike, it can be up to 90% front brakes and 10% rear brake. Now let me demonstrate why the front brake is so much more effective. All right, guys, so I'm outside. I'm going to demonstrate why the front brake is more powerful than the rear brake. So here in Texas, as part of our basic motor course, before we do quick stops, we actually have the students rub their foot on the ground like this. And then we'll have them put more weight on the foot and then rub it on the ground. Now you see when I put more weight on my foot, how it's more friction and it's harder for me to move my foot? Well, that's what happens when you apply the front brakes properly. If you squeeze with that progressive squeeze, allow the weight to transfer to the front wheel, the weight goes to the front wheel widens out, and then you get this right here. So that's why the front brake has more braking power than the rear brake. Now, it's very important to make sure that your handlebars are square before you start your braking. Now, let's go over how to use the front brake. So there's a couple things I want to cover when it comes to the front brake. The first thing is, when you apply the front brake, it has to be a progressive squeeze. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, all the way to 100%. Now, this is how it looks when you're on the bike. Now, the faster you squeeze the front brake lever, the shorter your stop will be. So let's look at what a faster squeeze looked like compared to the first squeeze that I showed. Now, when you apply the front brake, you don't want to modulate the front brake lever. You want a continuous squeeze. Now, it's very important that you don't grab the front brake lever. You don't want to go from 0 to 100% like in this next video. If you don't have ABS, which is anti-lock braking system, or your ABS fails and you lock up the front wheel, you have a split second to release the front brake lever and then reapply it properly. If not, the front wheel will tuck under, causing a low side crash. Now, if you happen to engage the ABS, do not release the brakes on the motorcycle to try to deactivate the ABS event. You want to maintain the front brake lever and rear brake pedal pressure. The ABS will deactivate itself when it's no longer needed. So now that we talked about the front brake, now let's talk about the rear brake. Now, when applying the rear brake, you want to use light to moderate pressure on the rear brake pedal. And you do not want to pump the brake pedal. When applying the rear brake, it has to be a smooth press, not a stomp. Now, if your back tire locks up and starts to skid and your front and back tires are aligned, you can slowly trail off the rear brake to reduce your skid. But if your back tires didn't skid and your front and back tires are not in alignment, you must hold the skid until the back tire is aligned with the front tire. Then you can slowly start to trail off the rear brake, or you can release the rear brake pedal. Now, if you release the rear brake when the tire is not in alignment, you could cause a high side crash. When emergency braking, you want to apply both front and rear brakes. By using both brakes, this will give you the most effective braking power. Now, I'm going to demonstrate this by riding in at 35 miles per hour. Now, I'm first going to use just the rear brake, then I will use just the front brake, and then I will use both brakes. I put cones down showing where I stopped. This cone is where I stopped using just the rear brake. Now the distance from the stopping point is about 80 feet. This cone was with just the front brake, and the stopping distance was about 55 feet. This cone was with both brakes, and the stopping distance was about 40 feet. As you can see, using both brakes is much more effective. When you are emergency braking, your body will continue to move forward as you're braking. Now, to prevent this from happening, there are two things that you can do. You can squeeze the tank with your knees to help keep your body from sliding forward, or you can stiffen up your arms just a little bit to keep you from sliding forward, which is what I do. Now, when you're braking, you want to keep your head and eyes up. If you keep your head and eyes up, it will help you keep the motorcycle from leaning to one side or the other once you get stopped. When you look down, the motorcycle will tend to fall to the side that you're looking. Now, the next thing is where many of us fall short, especially under stress. And that is, you want to check your side mirror once you get stopped. Now, this is very important. You want to check your mirror to see if the vehicles behind you are able to stop in time. Now, before I ride this demo, I want to go over the stopping sequence. Now, once you're in an emergency braking situation, you want to make sure that your handlebars are square. Then you want to roll off the throttle and squeeze in the clutch. And you want to start applying both front and rear brakes, while also downshifting into first gear. Once you get stopped, work on putting your left foot down, covering the rear brake with your right foot. This will put you in a great takeoff position if for any reason you need to pull off to avoid being struck from behind. So as you can see, there's a lot of things you have to do when emergency braking, and it all happens in a split second. So you have to practice this in order to be successful. Now, you may only need this one time in your riding career, but you have to get it right that one time. Now, let's talk about this exercise. Now, it doesn't take much to practice this. All you need is enough space to get up to speed and a designated point where you're going to start your braking. Now, I recommend starting out at about 20 miles per hour. Then you can increase your speed as your skills improve. Now, I think that 30 or 35 miles an hour is probably the fastest you need to go because it's more about the techniques than the speed. Now, for my demo, I'm going to run at 25 miles an hour in second gear and then 35 miles an hour in third gear. Now, as you're watching, I want you to pay attention to how my inputs are smooth and under control and how I keep my body upright and my head and eyes up. Now, first, I'm going to show the overall stops, and then I'll show views from the front brake, the rear brake, and then from my downshifting. So let's go check it out. Did you notice how many times I downshifted even though I was only in third gear? Now I would continue the downshift until the motorcycle is almost at a stop, and then I would put my foot down. Now let me show it again. Now I hope you got some value out of this video. Now, I recommend you watching this video series where I cover some common mistakes that riders make when emergency braking. Now, until next time, you got it. Practice, 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 and ride safe.